All right, buenos dias, everyone. Let's happy to be here. Come on over, Miriam. So, Rosa, thank you for that. And I'm sure Carolina's somewhere around here trying to listen virtually. I welcome you to the Women's Breakfast. And as Rosa said, for this session, we have invited our allies. So, welcome, allies. We try to alternate when we have women only and then women and allies. So, thank you. This has been a long time coming for Miriam and I to sit here together. And Miriam will have an opportunity to introduce herself, but I just want to say a couple of things. Because we do like to have conversations, and we like them to be very transparent. And I'm sure a lot of you are going to be able to relate to this. When you go to organizations and you meet other women, and sometimes you find some women that are very embracing, very supportive, very collaborative. And then sometimes you go and you find women that are a little bit more standoffish, they give you the hand and you're like, okay, let me walk this way. So, we have all kinds of personalities. That's the spirit of inclusion and diversity. When I first met Miriam, everyone had talked about Miriam and said, Miriam is a partner at KPMG, managing director at Accenture. So everybody assumed it was going to be a very competitive relationship, given these two brands. And the second we met each other, we literally became best friends. Mm-hmm. We put aside our corporate brands and we focused on our personal brands. And I sit on the HITEC board today because Miriam suggested that I join that board and join her in this effort at HITEC. So thank you, Miriam. And I really appreciate the spirit of let's unite, let's support each other professionally and personally. So Miriam, why don't you say a couple of things about yourself?
Thank you, Nellie. But before I do, I have to say something about you, woman, because I just watched you in action at Latitude, and I've seen you in action many times. And I think the reason why you and I bonded almost immediately is because there is a certain humility, yet very graceful human that is Nellie Borrero. And we so much, not just myself, but so many people respect you for what you do and the way you put the truth out there. Mm-hmm. There is never any doubt about what you're thinking, Nellie. And I really, really appreciate that because usually I agree with you. So thank you for that. So for those of you who don't know me, Miriam Hernandez-Kekel, I came to this country as an 8.5-year-old immigrant to the town of Kansas City, Missouri, with no friggin' idea about what we were doing and why we had been on a train and a bus and traveled through all these states. I had no idea what they were, didn't speak a word of English. Anyway, my mother, who, may she rest in peace, I always say I sit on her shoulders, I stand on her shoulders, had decided that my sister and I would never be the women we wanted to be, whatever that was, at age 8.5 and 10.5, if she didn't leave the environment in Guadalajara, Mexico. There's a lot of reasons for that, which we don't have time for today. But what I learned in coming to this country and watching my mother work 3 jobs in a city where people really didn't speak Spanish, even Mexicans didn't speak Spanish because they were 3rd and 4th generation. And having to learn how to speak a language, assimilate very quickly, there were no options. And really who taught us how to speak English were 2 Puerto Rican nuns at the church we went to. That was the only ones who spoke Spanish. Fast forward, and what I learned is that you have to be resourceful, you have to be determined, and I knew I didn't want to clean hotel rooms the way I saw my mother do it. Even though at age 14, she dragged me along with my sister during the summers, and we helped her so we could earn 45 cents an hour to buy our shoes. Mm-hmm. I did have the luxury of going to the most prestigious all-girls Catholic school in Kansas City. We were the charity case. The nuns got us in there, and it was us and a lot of wealthy girls. And you know what? I watched them, and I said, wait, why? And they were lovely to us, but it taught me that there was more that we could accomplish and do. And Sister Janet Helen, and then I'm going to stop here, in 7th grade said to me, oh, by the way, by then I was number 1 in my class, because the first time I read a book in English out loud and everyone laughed at me, I said, oh, yeah, no, this isn't going to happen again. Kind of like you and your Bronx accent.
Yeah.
I'm going to embrace this. And so by 7th grade, I was number 1 in my class. And Sister Janet Helen took me aside one day, and she said, you can be anything you want to be. You have the ability to do that. And I said, no, I can't be president of the United States. So anyway, that was really what launched me into a really fabulous career I've had, which we can talk about. But here I am, a retired partner from KPMG, so thrilled that a dream Patricia Rios and I had about having HITEC here came to be. And Nellie, thank you for having me on the stage.
No, absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for that, Miriam. So Miriam and I had dinner with Magda Rizari a couple of months ago. She worked at Verizon for a very long time, an incredible leader as well. And we're talking about our community. What is happening with our professional Latinx Hispanic American community? And we agreed on many things, but the one thing that really just kept us going, and at points we were mad about it, then we were like laughing about it, we went through a whole kind of different emotions, is the fact that a lot of times we see the Latino community and we see people going at a fast track, and we're like so impressed. We're like, wow, that person is really, really moving fast, going up the corporate ladder. What are they doing different? That's great. But then all of a sudden they get to a leadership role and they plateau. It just stops. It just ends. That track just completely just stops moving. And we were talking about this whole concept of career plateaus. How do we get to a certain place in our career, and then all of a sudden we're okay, we are staying in that role, we're not asking for more, we are coming from the perspective of we're just so blessed and happy, lucky to be here, but we're not really focusing on really pushing ourselves to get to that next level. So we wanted to take this opportunity to talk about career plateaus and how do we start thinking about how do we address that? No matter what level you're in your journey, whether you're entry, middle, or senior, how do you make sure you're asking yourself, am I plateauing? So we're gonna dig into that. And Miriam agreed to be very transparent with this. This is not easy to do. When you reach a certain point in your career journey or you're transitioning out, you start thinking back and thinking about, where did I miss some opportunities? So thank you, Miriam, for agreeing to have this conversation that's gonna help so many. So let me start with the first question. When you hear the statement, career plateau, what does that mean to you?
When I think about career plateau, I think two ways about it. I think about what it meant for me and how I defined it and what I did about it, and then what I have coached women to do throughout my career. Let me start with the personal, because I think that's always important. Like many of us that are immigrants, I was just happy to be here. I was happy that I got paid to go to college. I was happy that at one point Bell Labs sent me to Carnegie Mellon for 14 months and paid my salary. The day I found out I was going to make $100,000 a year, I was like, oh my God. I called my mother up. I was like, can you believe it? And I was just happy to be here. I felt blessed. And then I started realizing as my career advanced that it was kind of stalling it was kind of slow. Now, some of it was I did it because I had 2 children, I was a single mom, there were reasons for it. But I also realized that I had a mentality of I'm blessed to be here. And part of that is correct. I am blessed to be here. But in some ways, I had to make my own opportunity, and I knew what I was capable of. So I think career plateau is how you define it, what your ambitions are. And not everyone's ambitions are the same. And it also has to do with the mindset, and I know we'll talk about that more. Can you really be the number one person? Can you be the leader? Can you have that role? And until you start thinking and believing that these bigger things are things that you can do, it's very hard. So there's a bit of a confidence freeze that happens internally. And then there is the outside in, which is people constantly reminding you that you're not good enough. You're the only person in the room. You get passionate about a topic and suddenly you're shrill. Suddenly you're too loud. Suddenly you're too opinionated. My God, I don't know how many times I've been told, I'm too opinionated. If there are any other people from KPMG that I worked with or worked for or worked for me, I'm sure every one of them has told me how opinionated I am. How you put your message out there. And yes, you learn to adapt, and we'll talk about that, but that confidence freeze that happens is something we have to work on. And that will help you then manage the external, right? The people who believe you can only do this. And I think that the way I've coached women on the same topic, Nellie, is saying to them, think as big as you can think. What is it you really want to accomplish? What is your goal? It could be different, right, for each of us. But the biggest goal that you have, think about it, put yourself in that, and I'm going to give you those opportunities. It's not up to me to decide whether you should take them or not. If you don't want them, say no. But that's sort of the two sides of it.
Yeah, and I think that's spot on, right? I mean, when people start to label you too opinionated or too, aggressive instead of assertive, which is so awesome, and all these different things, right? How do you prepare that response? I've always, throughout my career, had a conversation with myself about how to respond to people when they label me a certain way. Because that way I'm prepared. Instead of freezing, I am prepared to come with my response to advocate for myself, because while we have a lot of advocates, I know for a fact with 100% conviction, I am my biggest advocate for myself. So it was sitting down with Rosa yesterday, you and I, and talking about this session today. We were talking about moments where we, for example, can look back and say, I definitely plateaued at that point in my career, and I didn't even know it was happening. So the next question for you, Miriam, is looking back at your amazing career journey, which has been incredible, were there moments that you recognize now that you were plateauing, and how did that play into how you look at your career now?
I think the very first time I was conscious about it, I was working at Plateau, and I was on a management program, and they were putting me through different roles. This is going to sound really old, so please don't judge me. But they put me into a role for a year of selling payphones. Imagine payphones. Some of you don't even know what they are.
Look up the image. Look it up.
And what that was convincing businesses to put payphones out in front. And that was my 1-year rotation into sales. And I was like, oh yeah, no, I'm not, this is not for me. And so I went to my boss at the time and I said, hey, how soon can I get to the network? Because that's what I really wanted to do. I knew that was the core of the telephone business. And he said, well, you're not really trained to do that. Well, yeah, the idea is I'm supposed to get trained. He goes, well, we have this opportunity in New Jersey, and it's working for Bell Labs, the derivative, Bellcore. You'd have to move to New Jersey. You'd have to interview. There's probably about 50 candidates for this job. And it's a 2-year rotation. And I went home and I called my mother, single mom of 2 kids at this point. I called my mother. I said, what the heck? The only way they say I can get ahead is to go punch my ticket in New Jersey. Who moves to New Jersey? I lived by the beach in Southern California at the time. So I had a lot of heart search and mental search about, am I going to hold myself back? Am I going to say no thank you and kind of just keep doing these, what I considered menial jobs, even though they were management jobs? Or I'm going to show them. And I kind of chose the latter, because I felt that if I didn't do that, I would just be languishing in these telephone company management jobs. So I chose to go. Of course, thinking the whole way, there's no way I'm going to beat out 50 people. I don't have a technical degree. I'm going to the labs. They're not going to pick me. Well, guess what? I got the job. And it changed, it changed the trajectory of my career, because then they sent me to Carnegie Mellon, and then so it was very different. But it was that period of about 2 months where I felt afraid that if I didn't do something, I was going to be some manager, maybe a director in a telephone company, and be bored to death.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. But it's those things that scare you, though, the ones that get you to the greatest places, right? Because I remember going on when my first global travel, I was going to a country where, I didn't know the language. And I got in the car, left my house, and I literally cried all the way to the airport, cried. And then I got to the airport, called my husband, still crying, got on the plane, still crying. And it was the best trip ever, and I just really got over it. But we do experience fear, and it's okay to experience fear. And it's okay to share with other people, because it makes other people's lives a little bit easier when they're not the only ones. So.
Speaking of crying, so I get the job. I plant my kids with my mom in California, because now I have to go, my God, they're moving me. I have to find a place to live. I arrived with 14 bags, not kidding. Most of you know I'm a bit of a clothes horse. So I arrived with 14 bags, talk about humility, to a Ramada Inn that didn't have an elevator. That was close to the labs where I was going to work. And I carried every one of those at night up. I was much younger, carried them up, laid on my bed and cried. Could not stop crying, kept saying, what have I done? And it was March in New Jersey. There was no trees, no nothing. It was snowing. Yeah, I cried and cried. I kept calling my mother, what have I done? Yeah. But it all had a good outcome in the end.
We could do a whole session about when we cried. That'll be the topic for the next one. So Miriam, you mentioned a little bit about mindset, and I really want to dig into this one, right? Because our mindset around our careers and all the things that we have going on professionally and personally, our beautiful culture that does so many wonderful things for us, but also, halts us and prevents us from doing other things because, we're injected with that guilt gene and can't say no, have to say yes all the time. When we think about mindset and we think about the next opportunity or how we want to position our career, how big of a role does mindset play into navigating us having to break these barriers and getting away from being in a situation where we're plateauing, right? Because we tell ourselves all the time with that negative inner voice, no, you can't do this. Who do you think you are? This wasn't meant for you. There's no one like you there. It's going to be really hard. So this negative mindset really plays into us. How have you been able to address that?
It's interesting because just yesterday, I had a reminder from a very good friend of mine. I don't know if he's in the audience right now. He'll be speaking later. But about mindset, I was talking about an opportunity I have, which I'm honored that they've given me this opportunity, another entity. And I was saying, but I really don't know what I have to offer. Mm-hmm. Like I'm really deciding whether I should do it or not, because what am I going to bring to the table? And he quickly said to me, really? Like most women I know, you're doubting that you could be the best at this. Why are you doubting it at this point? And it reminded me how important mindset is, because here I am, retired, had a great career at KPMG, have done incredible things. I'm on good boards now, and I'm still doubting whether someone wants me, someone that's a Fortune 10 company wants me to come do something for them, and yet I don't think I'm good enough. Mm-hmm. Like, seriously, at this point in my career? So mindset's everything. When I had the little reaction and thought about it, I was like, oh, damn, I can't believe I'm back there. But it's so important. You talk to yourself in the mirror. For years, I talked to myself in the shower out loud. Okay, today's going to be a really tough meeting. I got to get that funding. I got to launch that project. I got to do this. I got to hire that person. And I would practice what I was going to say in the shower over and over again as a way to get my mindset right about who I was and what I was bringing to the table. And I do have to say that my husband, well, that was the good outcome of coming to New Jersey. I met my husband. But my husband has been such a supporter of reminding me who I am, mm-hmm. and to not let that stop me. Because think about what you've accomplished. He has given me those pep talks throughout the part of my career he's been supportive of, and it's really helpful to have people in your life who do that.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
But don't get yourself into the mindset of somehow you can only be number two. You know the funny thing, the first person who pointed out to me that I had that was in Israel. I was on a business trip with a business partner, who people might imagine who they are because they're headquartered out of Israel, and they own a big billing system. And I was heading up a business for KPMG implementing this billing system. And one of the gentlemen said to me at dinner, this Israeli man says to me, and I was with my boss, why do you think you have to be number two? You really should be number one. Have you not picked up on that yet? And I was like, what? The man doesn't even know me. I'm sitting here. I was embarrassed. I went back to the hotel, and I'm like, oh, someone's telling me this. And it was like a switch that caused me to think, what am I doing that I'm presenting myself in a way as though I can only be number two? So
Those people are important in our lives,
They
right?
are.
They
It gives
point
me
out.
chills thinking
Yeah.
about it right
It's
now.
interesting. You said a couple of things in that last response, and it reminded me of what Julie Sweet, our CEO at Accenture, says all the time is, be fearless, but be prepared. I mean, you have to be prepared because you could be fearless and go out and try a lot of different things, take risks, but if you're not prepared, it's just not going to work out, right? The other thing that resonated for me is the whole thing about selecting that right partner in your life, because you do need that cheerleader. I mean, we just get to such different levels when we have a genuine cheerleader that is part of our life and our journey. You talked about meeting your husband in New Jersey. By the way, I live in New Jersey, so when she talks about Jersey being all dirty and gloom and
No, I didn't say dirty. I said it was doom and gloom.
I perceived it
love
that
it
way. I
now.
perceived it that way.
I'm
but
sorry,
no,
Nellie. Don't
that's
cry.
Okay. No, it's okay. But we both lived there now, so it's all good.
I
It's all
lived there
good.
35 years, so something's
But I did go
working.
kicking and screaming to New Jersey because I'm a New Yorker from the Bronx.
Yeah, I
So
was
I'm like,
gonna
oh,
say.
what is this Jersey thing? Anyway, but talking about choosing the right person, having that cheerleader in your life, we also have talked about, we all have personal life outside of our professional environments. And I know, and people that are close to me know, that I am obsessed with my children and with my family. I hover like a helicopter over and over. I land, I take off, I land again. I mean, it is, there's no shame in my game with that, right? But I also know that, that term that you've always probably heard is that you're as happy as your saddest child. So whenever something's going on with my children, I am not okay, right? I get on calls and I pretend I'm okay and I'm smiling, but inside I am literally falling apart. And then you have to rely on people that you could say, hey, this is happening. So you and Rosa and Carolina that's not here, when I'm going through my pain points, I rely on these people because life is not perfect. It's not going to be happy every day. So Miriam, I wanted us to talk about, when we're thinking about career plateaus also, is sometimes we have to make decisions where we prioritize different things in our lives. And when you think about, your beautiful family and your granddaughter, yes, she's amazing.
No, she's right over here somewhere, I
She's
think.
somewhere. Okay, let's not point her out. We don't want to embarrass her.
No,
But
I'm
she's
just
here.
saying she's here somewhere.
But what advice do you give people when we're thinking about career moves, when we're thinking about what's pulling us in our family with its elderly parents, with its children, with its nieces and nephews? I mean, life happens.
Life happens. I had a CEO at KPMG, our former CEO, who used to say, woman, and I've heard her say it many times, there is no work-life balance. There's only what you choose in that moment is your priority. Yeah. And I firmly believe that. We probably live that every day. But I'm with you. I always say that a little bit differently. Who's made me the happiest in my life? My children. Who's made me my saddest in my life? My children. And now by extension, my grandchildren. I have 6 of them from age 2 to 22, if you can believe. And it is such a part of how I think every day. And sometimes they're my biggest cheerleaders, I remember taking my then 15-year-old granddaughter, she's 22 now, on a business trip with me to California during the summer. And I was not extremely happy with what was going down internally. And she's hearing me on conference calls as I'm driving, and I'm thinking, oh my God, what is she listening to? And afterwards, I hung up the phone, and she said to me, Lita, because that's what my grandkids called me, Lita for abuelita, Lita, it's going to be okay. You're great. Don't worry. It's going to be okay. But I really do think that it's part of your network. I couldn't have done the move to New Jersey if it wasn't for my mom. I couldn't have gone away to Carnegie Mellon if it wasn't for my husband and my children agreeing to, get along without me. I couldn't have done many things without my family. So I think that turmoil or that happiness that you feel, you need to manage it because work goes on. Like you said, it stirs inside of you. But I also think it could be such a great uplifting, not to point her out, but having my granddaughter be a HITEC scholar, she'll be a HITEC fellow somewhere someday. Being a HITEC scholar and being here with us, you don't know. It's so uplifting for me, like, oh, maybe I'm doing something a little bit right in life.
And I love that because I think for our community for so many years, we have not engaged our children in certain things because we say, well, we don't want to draw attention to that. We don't want to say that, somebody, oh, they got hooked up because they're the son or the daughter of this one, right? We have to get so past that. I got past that years ago. People will bring in kids to work, to get a full-time job, and they would say, don't say you're my child. When my daughter came to Accenture, she was there for 5 years. I couldn't retain her. That's another story. But I literally told everybody, that's my daughter, because I wanted other people to feel comfortable within our community to be able to give these opportunities to their children that earned it, right? Because they've worked hard. So I want all of us to get in the mindset of ensuring that we're not walking around so apologetically sometimes, right?
It gets back to, I'm just happy to be here. Our counterparts that are not Hispanic at work always rave about their kids. And therefore, and we rave about our kids, but not being embarrassed. Yeah. You were a great example to me, because I never thought, this happened at the May, you had Kenny there, who is a joy. Thank you. And I'm like, wait a minute, if Kenny's a HITEC scholar, what about Alexandra? She's going to college. I'd love for her to hook into this community. And we made it happen, and here she is.
And that's exactly what I'm trying to do, to make sure that other people do the same thing. So yay, it works. All right, so another question for you. Thank you. We're going to open it up for questions in a little bit, but the last question, Miriam, for you is, because I think this is so important, and I think HITEC just creates this landscape for us. Could you share tips into building and leveraging a professional network to break through career plateaus? How do you make sure you have people that are telling you, you could do more, you could do better, let's move it?
Yeah. I think you have to be, it's such a multifaceted question, right? Because we can get very caught up in the official mentor networks that many of our companies build. And I think sometimes you find those advocates, those cheerleaders, those allies in places you don't expect. I mentioned Sister Janet Helen in 7th grade. May she rest in peace. I still think about her often. But seriously thinking, seriously thinking about the people in your life and connecting with them, and making sure that in your professional life, making sure that it's not a transaction. I'm so anti having networking relationships that are transactional, because really it's not authentic. Where I think I've gotten the most both benefit personally in terms of being able to help others and others being able to help me is where I have a real connection and where I'm interested. Who are your kids? What do they do? And I can remember almost all the kids of people who have been significant working on my teams, because it's just part of who we are. So having that network that is not just transactional is very important. I still have people that I can call on today. So when I came back to KPMG as an example in 2008, I was in a bad place at Bearing Point for a lot of reasons, and I was very unhappy. And KPMG had been calling me for about a year, trying to recruit me back to the firm because the non-compete was over. And I kept saying, no, I've got to stay here. I've got this team of 500 people. I've got to protect them. I'm not leaving. Things are bad, but I'm not leaving. And then the right day happened where my boss and I just had a terrible conversation. And I thought, now's the time. And I was able to reach out to someone who had been reaching out to me. In fact, I had told them never to call me again. We weren't going to be friends because they were bugging me too much. And they called me on the right day. And I came back to KPMG, but it was because of that network that was not just a transactional one, a relationship. And that would be my biggest point, is that network, whether it's your family, whether it's people you work with, whether it's people in other organizations that you come in, like in HITEC, don't let those relationships be transactional, because they won't be there for you, and you won't be there for them. And we need that. No one can make their ambitions and their dreams come true without a village.
That is true. That is true. And for some people, Miriam, right? I mean, we have extroverts and we have introverts. And for introverts, it's a lot harder to build those relationships. Do you have any suggestions for introverts themselves, how to really start building that?
Yeah, it's interesting. When I was working at KPMG, I used to coach a lot of my directors and managing directors for how to get them through the partner process. And the introverts were the hardest, because don't like to go in and toot your own horn. They like to go in and talk about they, the team. But when you're in a partner panel at KPMG, you'd better be very clear about what your goals are, what you've accomplished, et cetera. And I used to say to them, leading up to this, speak so bluntly and so clearly and so about yourself that you are uncomfortable. Because I promise you that your discomfort is not going to be anything compared to how someone else who is an extrovert will come in. So you'll be uncomfortable, but you'll probably be just hitting the right pitch. Yep. Yep. So I think for people who are introverted, you really have to practice in a way that you're uncomfortable. And I guarantee you that discomfort that you feel will be just the right pitch. Conversely, for those of us who are not afraid to say what we think, two of us sitting up here, I think you have to learn how to practice a little humility in how you do that, because it's not just about what you're saying. The importance of what you're saying is how people are receiving it and how they're absorbing it. And so whether it's you're trying to get funding for a pet project, or you with all your things that you do, or whether you're trying to recruit someone, or whether you're just trying to make a point in a meeting, or you're trying to lead a team, have your opinions definitely and make those opinions known, but add a little bit of humility to it, and it will really help how people receive your message.
Yeah, it's like read the room, right?
Read the room. Use your intuition.
Yeah,
we talked about that a lot.
Yeah.
Right? Use your own intuition about that level of engagement.
Well, we have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions. Does anybody have a question? Could come up to the mic, have a question. In the meantime, while someone's walking up, someone. There we go. We have one
9
there.
minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Marcella Luke from Wells Fargo. I just, first of all, thank you so much for all of the great information that you shared with us today. I think you spoke a lot to things that we can do to help break through that plateau. But I'm curious to know, with allies in the room here, what's some advice that you can share with our allies and advocates for how they can help Latinas in tech break through that plateau as well?
You want to go? You want me to go? Well, a couple of things. That's a great question. For all you allies in here, I heard the best story last night at the reception. A gentleman, which I don't think he's in this room right now, I don't see him. We were talking about the role of an ally. And he gave me an example of what he did. He's an executive level, and they were hiring a Latina woman into his organization. And he decided to take a look at the whole profile. So he looked at her experience, he looked at, where she was coming from, credentials, the whole thing. And then he looked at the salary they were going to offer her. And he started asking questions. He said, this compensation to me does not seem like it's at the level that other women or men would get. And he started asking the questions, and then the HR organization changed that, right? That's what an ally does. It starts looking at where's the equity in this situation? Where's the fairness in this situation? Also, if you're in a room and all the allies are there and there's only one person, right? Miriam talked about being the only one. When you're the only one sometimes in the room, what's happening in your head is you're not 100% focused on everything that's being talked about, because you're trying to figure out how you're gonna engage when you know you're the only one, right? So there's a lot of different distractions going on. What I say to the allies is pull that person in. Do not shut that person down and say, oh, they have nothing to contribute, they have no value to add, I'm not sure they even fit in here, right? If you're thinking that, chances are you're not being an ally and that person has a lot to offer, but the risk to get engaged and speak up is too much of a risk for that person at that moment within that culture. So allies are about, ask the questions, what can you do to lift the profile or the equity of the person that is representing the difference?
Totally agree with that. I think the other thing I would say is answer the phone. And what I mean by that is, if a female leader that you know, or a female in your organization, a peer of yours, whatever it is calling to say, I really need a perspective. Don't mansplain what they're saying to you. Listen, and then help them in the same way that Nellie is saying, either through advocating or being supportive in a meeting or asking the right questions. I like that technique, right? If someone asks you the right question so that it's not just coming from you, but someone's teeing it up for you, and it gives you the opportunity to then show and talk about. I think it's a great partnership.
100%. Yeah, I have a question here.
Hi.
Hi.
This is Mario Villacourt from Intel. I just had a recent experience with someone that wanted to meet with me, Nelly, and she says, "Hey, I just want to meet with you. Someone recommended you as someone that you can mentor, right?" Another female said that to her, and then I started talking to her about her experiences. But she said, I asked her something about, "Hey, what are your ambitions?" And she goes, "Well, I don't have much." And I started questioning that, and I said, "Do you realize that you have a lot of experience?" And, she's also married. I says, "Do you know how much your husband makes?" "No, I don't." She goes, "Oh, really? Okay." And then I said, "Do you realize also that every man that I've hired has always declined the offer? And women don't do that," I said. "So I'm asking all the women here, whenever you get an offer, negotiate, because chances are you're getting a lower offer. But if you don't ask, you're not going to get it." Most guys here have done that, and I tell you, it works.
Yeah, that's an ally right there.
Yeah, right there.
So we're going to get ready to close. Miriam, thank you so much. Oh, no, do we have another question? Yes.
Perdón, estoy un poco ronca.
No, it's okay.
You mentioned something earlier about flipping the script from being aggressive to being assertive. Could you share a little bit about how you did that in your interactions? And as your career progressed and you went from maybe the entry-level positions to the director and the executive, how did you manage that narrative as your career also evolved?
Yeah, great question. Do you want me to start, Miriam? Yeah. Okay, so for those that have participated in previous events here at HITEC and Women's Breakfast, you probably have heard me say that I do not like being mad at myself. I really, really don't. It drains my energy. It impacts everything. And I, very early on in my career, knew that I would get mad at myself when I wasn't asserting myself, when I wasn't claiming my space, the space that I had earned. So I know that there are a lot of biases that are placed on women of color, particularly Latina women as well. So that aggressive word for me became a thorn very early on, because I didn't mind being aggressive. I really didn't mind it, because I had to be to navigate this culture. But I also knew that it was not going to help me in my journey. So the word assertive felt more lighter. It felt more professional. And I would literally rehearse how I was going to be assertive on any given day. There were times that I would literally pray before I would get on a call for the wisdom to be able to engage, for the courage to be able to engage. So I started giving myself a metric. And with every meeting I would go to, or every call I would get on, I would say, you're going to ask either 2 questions, you're going to make 2 statements. I would give myself a metric. And if I did not meet that metric, I would really be pissed off at myself, right? So I just started to play this little game with myself of like, how am I going to put metrics in place to force myself to step out of my comfort zone? And I've done that in all the countries around the world where I've gone. And there have been countries where I go and people are like, why is she here? Why is she here? We don't want her in the meeting. And I'm like, well, I'm here. So I would say to you, it is about, for me, I give myself metrics and I become my own competitor.
I'm not quite as organized as Nellie about how to make myself a better person. I'm a bit more, impulsive, might be a good word. But I am a competitor. And I do compete with that 3rd grade version of myself, standing up, reading, and not being able to pronounce those words in English, and going home crying and saying, I'm going to read every book till I can read it out loud. That's who I compete with every day. And I remind myself of the sacrifices to get to where I am, not just mine, my mother's, and our community. And I just say, I'm better than this. And really, I think I'm okay with being aggressive. I think using the word assertive is more for others, right? I feel like I'm very assertive, but it's this thing about listening. I think that's the skill that changed for me to go from aggressive to assertive, was becoming a better listener and using my intuition to read the room and understanding if I'm going to convince someone that, hey, I deserve the job, I'm a good person, I deserve the funding, whatever it is, I'm a worthy adversary, whatever it is, then I need them to hear and to listen and to absorb, and therefore I need to be a better listener. So I'm hitting them with the things that are important to them, not just the things that are important to me. And I think that's how I went from being aggressive, although people might disagree, to
Opinionated,
assertive.
aggressive, all of them.
I once was called a pit bull. I didn't really like that.
Well, listen, you touched on intuition, and for goodness sakes, let's listen to our intuition. Too many times we know what we're supposed to be doing. We know it's the right thing to do, and yet we take this great thing that we have to feed us the right answer, and we just shut it down. And we talked about that yesterday. Is why do we shut down our intuition when it's our greatest guide to get us to the next level and do the things we have to do? So, Miriam, we have to close this.
Yes.
But thank you. You are a superstar. You're amazing.
Right back at you,
I
sister.
think the world of you. And I know that whenever I call you, you're right there to talk and have a conversation. And I hope that we do this again sometime soon. So I have one final announcement. Thank you, Miriam, for being so transparent. We're gonna, and men and allies, do not be upset, but we're gonna call all the women up on stage, and we're gonna take a picture of all the women that attend the women's breakfast. And we thank all the men that attended and our allies, and let's have a great day. And for those that are going to the gala, I hope you enjoy yourself and make it a good one. Network, make it count. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Nellie.
You're great. You were great. You were great.